So the older your product is, the closer you are to the center, and thus the more connected you are to everything that has come since. And you see a lot of examples of that, and that is how Amazon works, right? I mean, Amazon, if you boil down Amazon, it is a search engine that wants to show people what it thinks they're going to buy. That's the whole thing. It doesn't necessarily look at the highest bid for advertising or things like that. It's like, what is the thing that we know is going to turn into a conversion right now? And we're going to prioritize that organically. That's just how rankings work, or with advertising.
Hello, CPGers. Welcome to the Startup CPG podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Scharf. Today's guest is my friend Leon Lewis from my favorite Amazon agency and our partner, Daybreak Growth. I worked with Leon for my brand, and I was so impressed. I hold him in such high regard. He's an incredibly smart and interesting guy who is a great fit for emerging brands because a lot of big agencies out there will charge you some crazy $5,000 a month retainer. Then you don't have any money left to actually spend on advertising. His retainer is very reasonable, and he also gets great results. He will talk you through what your first year is going to look like and model out the P&L for you. And then as time progresses, you'll understand exactly what's going on and the kind of things that you need to change and whether you should increase your spend or decrease your spend. And it's just all very reasonable. So listen in to hear about his professional journey. And later on in the episode, we get into his really useful tips for what it's going to be like on your first year on Amazon. And there are a lot of low-hanging fruit things that you can learn and incorporate into your own Amazon strategy. If you want to reach out to him, his email is leon@daybreak.growth. All right, let's get to the episode. All right, welcome to another episode of the Startup CPG podcast. I am your host, Daniel Scharf, and today we are diving into the world of Amazon. We're with our official agency partner we think is the best partner for emerging brands because I've worked with them. They're called Daybreak Agency, led by our friend Leon Lewis. Leon has an impressive background. He started his entrepreneurial journey as a gamer and a publisher. He later got into the music industry. He founded a record label that contributed to the success of artists like Future Islands and Kesha. And he was even the CEO of a leading ukulele company and is a master ukulele player himself. His career has spanned roles at Honer, Health Warrior, Rebel, and in 2019, he founded Growth Partners, which is an Amazon and retail media strategy and management agency for new and growing CPG brands. Leon, because I've worked with you personally, I am so excited to not just partner with you, but also get to have you here on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
All right, so let's get into it. I wonder, maybe we could just start with your background a little bit. Can you tell me, because you've had such a varied career in the background, and most people will be listening to this, but if you were watching the video, you would see the plethora of ukuleles in the background here. So who is Leon Lewis? Just tell us the story.
Yeah. It feels like it gets weirder over time. I don't know. I started my first business online in 1997. I was 12 in 1997 for the record. And I designed a board game and, beta website and figured out how to sell it online and got my mom to sign for the one company that would process credit card transactions online at the time and everything. And it was successful. I mean, we made money. My parents were very concerned and all of that. And but I was a kid, I grew out of it. I'd always been a musician, got into the world of running a record label, did that for a long time. I ran a business online all through high school, paid my way through college doing it full time. I kind of got out of that for a variety of reasons. 2008 and kind of the financial crisis was one of them, and some personal things were a part of it. And, moved to the world of Honer. Matthias Honer invented the harmonica in the 1850s. And, I came into that company, the US office, and we were just starting to sell online, as well as we had a massive retail distribution. And I was kind of the only person that, knew how to figure out Amazon, at the time, and even Guitar Center and eBay was really huge. And, this was very early on. We helped launch the musical instrument category at Amazon when Amazon was still launching new categories. and we were beta testing advertising on Amazon, if you can imagine that. So did that for a long time, ended up, being put in charge of their ukulele company, Lanakai, which at the time was the largest in the world. We scaled that up. We sold it in 2015. And I was, here in Richmond, Virginia, and, met Shane Emmett, that was the founder of Health Warrior. And they're trying to get someone to help with digital. And like, Richmond in 2015, like people just weren't applying for that job. I was like, I'll give this a shot. Like, this seems interesting. And Health Warrior sold to Pepsi. I spent a little time at Rebel, and I didn't come from the agency world, in the music industry and stuff. That wasn't really a thing, having all these agencies and service providers, and so I always just kind of felt like there was room to do it a little bit better and do it a little bit differently. And, 2019 at Expo East, I had a friend of mine, Rusty Porter, was like, just follow me around. You'll meet people that want your help. And I think the first three people we talked to were like, do you know an Amazon guy? And I was like, yeah, okay. And, figured out how to start from there. And we've grown very organically since, right? I mean, we have this, great official partnership, with Startup CPG, which, look, it helps us get clients, but it also just helps me be engaged and take calls with the community and help people. Our team has grown, we're nearing a dozen people, and we're still referral only, right? I mean, our average retention is 18 months for brands that we work on, right? So we just have these good, authentic, longer term relationships. And it's been fun. It's been fun to kind of come into it and develop this perspective.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about you. I think you don't even really have like a LinkedIn out there. I was really excited when I first got to meet you through somebody in the channel who was like, "Yeah, this is the guy. If you're an early brand and you don't want to kill yourself on a retainer, this is the high performance guy to work with." And so, I was just super impressed working with you. I think just mainly because of how realistic you are about everything. Like, you will show people the P&L and like, look, this is what you're going to convert most likely. And if you put in this much money, here are the sales that it could be for you through the first 12 months of the business. Like, this is probably what it's going to look like, kind of like a flight path. And it may not be the thing that you want it to be, or it may be a lot better than you expect, but whatever it is, we're going to learn through this together. And so for me, the process just kind of made a lot of sense and just, just overall very reasonable. I also I was going to ask you. So I'm also a musician, not a successful one, but I really enjoy the process of it. And when I meet other musicians, sometimes they'll say
Yeah.
things like, "Hey, what's it like to launch a CPG product?" I'm like, "Well, it's a lot like trying to make it as an artist as well. Actually, the process for me is so similar. Of you're developing a product. Maybe you're out there in the studio or you're
Yeah.
practicing and you're really trying to get the product that you're bringing to market to the best place that it can be. You're trying to develop a core audience. You're figuring out who it speaks to. And things just don't get discovered on Spotify. Like, you're out there marketing it. You're doing concerts the same way that we're out there doing digital marketing and demos
Totally.
and, building your audience. What do you think? Any other parallels that you see?
Uh, well, I mean, there's no one investing in bands. So, getting investors and backing is a challenge for sure. And you go through rounds of iteration. I think a lot of people always say that, like, many bands, they put out a first album, and you have some success, and then like the second album's kind of a dud, and you come back to it with the third iteration. I think we've seen a lot of brands have their first innovation, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, we learned a little bit, and now, we're going to do it our third product line and really nail it. Right? So it's that you have to work until it just really starts to flow. And it's also one of those things, like music and brands. I think you just hit that critical mass of like, hey, we put out enough flyers, we gave out enough demos, we gave out enough samples, all of that, that like we just started to actually build that awareness.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it starts feeding itself and you get the
Yeah.
word of mouth going. I was really interested when, I was just learning about what I needed to do when I was putting out my first album and talking to other musicians. Somebody who I really respect, who had helped with the production of the album, she wears really cool glasses and has a total look that works for her. And I was asking her about it. She's like, "Yeah, well, here's the coach who worked with me on that and helped me
Right.
figure out like who I was and then how I wanted to present to the audience. And then that was my thing." So like, pretty interesting, kind of a parallel to a lot of the branding and marketing stuff that we all work with as well.
For
So
sure.
total tangent here, but I know you and I both love this topic. Hopefully it's
Yeah,
interesting
that's
to
great.
everybody out there who's listening. And if it's not, then, well, you know where the fast forward button is.
Right.
So, okay. So, and yeah, getting into the Amazon world that early, pretty interesting to me. I have a family
Yeah.
friend. His name is Michael Lazaro. He had an agency in the very early days for Facebook marketing. It was called
Yeah.
Buddy Media, and then he sold it for $1 bajillion. And I just was so fascinated by the people who can figure out the emerging technology and how to build services business around that, where then they are the first ones who know how to do it. And then when people kind of realize you're the person that they call. Did you ever feel that way about the Amazon business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, all of these things started off like relatively, Amazon was just much more simple previously, right? I mean, the cost of advertising is just one of those things where it's like, the business was much, much easier to run and build and invest and to grow because the cost of advertising was just like 10% of what it is today. When I was running my record label, like we were a record label, but we had about 5,000 items that we sold. We were a mail order business, and we designed a platform that like basically is what Shopify is, right? And it was so interesting to just kind of see these very simple concepts that were very practical, really, really emerge and become like a part of a much kind of more complicated whole, but like fundamentally they're still the same, right? Those fundamentals still matter. And I do think that, one of the things that I try to encourage people to really look at is, zoom out and like let's look at the whole business. Let's like where are we going? Like what is our 12-month plan? What is the financial outcome of that? Because I think sometimes, forest for the trees, whatever, analogy you want to use, we get too zoomed in. I also think sometimes e-commerce is over specialized now, and it's like if you nail the fundamentals, many, many other things fall into place, right? There's a million metrics for e-commerce, but there's like five that you have to nail, and then everything else, kind of sorts itself out. So I think just
What are
having
what are those
yeah,
five? Since we're on
yeah,
top?
for sure. Well, it's like, I mean, do people convert, on the product, right? I mean, that's obviously critical, and that's a reflection of, having the right. Again, it's like the right pack size, the right creative, conversion is really critical. The repeat and retention rate is an important part of that, not just as a whole, but then your lifetime value is really, really critical, and then obviously kind of your cost of advertising, your tacos, your total advertising cost of sales over time. How is that evolving, right? And like on Amazon, if you run an advertising report, there's like 50 columns, and it's like when I run those reports, I just delete like 45, because it's like, okay, these are the things that are really going to matter. And the rest is valid if we really need to dig in, but it's also noise, versus the holistic piece of it. So, from some ways, I mean, it's a combination, I think, of looking at it from a fundamental perspective and then also, just being able to look at it as your own consumer would, right? And honestly, I mean, founders, we love the founder community, like the passion that people have, but sometimes it's like, well, like let's really like boil it down to the fundamentals. Like I try to take calls with as many people as I can, even if they just have questions. And people come to me with these questions, I'm like, you don't need to worry about this anytime soon. It's like this is so much further down the track for you. Like let's align on where you're at today. So I think kind of helping to guide that, and presenting things, I think, in a relatively simple light, because it's like, again, we know if we nail some of these fundamentals, then everything will move in the right direction.
Makes sense. All right, cool. So getting back to some of those formative experiences for you on
Yeah.
Amazon, and I don't know if you would say it was like more Health Warrior when you were at Rebel. What were you learning in those days? What were the key things that you were learning yourself about Amazon that would then later lead you to start?
One of the things, Health Warrior was a venture backed brand, and like grocery was crazy high growth at the time and everything. And, one thing that we thought was that there were just always like there's just someone that just had magic. And it was just like, oh, we just have to find the person that's just going to nail it. Like we just haven't figured it out, and we definitely learned over time, like, oh no, we have to do the work. Like we have to do the hard stuff, and that was one part of it. The other thing was that even, and this is 2015, 2016 or so, even back then we were seeing, increasing, cost of advertising. We also started to realize at that point that big CPG would do anything to protect its turf. That was a really big thing that we learned in the bar set. And, that sometimes being that high growth brand is, it puts you in that middle ground where the big brands are like, this is our number one person to go after. And then the small brands are like, we just have to take what they have right now. And so we would end up in this very interesting middle ground. But the other thing that we really started to dig into and got us kept us actively investing, in the brand was that we saw repeat and retention was healthy and that we were building more momentum against it, right? We didn't have great tools to measure that, at the time, but like now we do, and that's one thing we really dig into. It's like we're talking about CPG, we're talking about consumable products, and so rarely, are people buying a snack and they have it one time and that's like they just never buy it again, right? So like those are things that are very green or very red flags for us. It's like if we could be early stage with the brand and say like, hey, your repeat and retention is great right out of the gate. We have people already placing their fourth or fifth order. We can just stretch this out over a 24-month period, and you're going to get really excited, right, about like the outcome. And those customers just build more and more profit dollars over time, right? Conversely, right, I mean, we also see brands where the discussion's more like, hey, like you really need to think about, the price point or, the conversion or, like the overall product, like promise and everything. And maybe like Amazon's going to teach you a hard lesson right now and maybe take a pause, do that work and come back and let's try it again. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, man, super interesting. I was just remembering I used to work at Mars Chocolate way back in the day, and they were just starting to think about Amazon way
Right.
later, probably than they should have in retrospect,
Yeah.
because Hershey's was doing 5 or 10x what they were doing just
Right.
because they weren't paying attention to it. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it is pretty interesting for a legacy company like that to think about, like, okay, they're just not spending the resources, but then they're not getting started. And I think to your point around, like, it doesn't just happen overnight. Like, you gotta put in the work. It's like with anything in life. I think the temptation is for us to see. So there are a couple people out there that, I don't know, go viral for some reason. You're like, yeah,
Right.
we just need to do that. Like, there's almost no strategy where you're actually going to make that happen.
Right.
Like to the Bitcoiners out there, like, probably the people who
Right.
already made that filthy money already have it. And it's going to be very hard for you to make it very simply. And,
Yep.
I think I've learned that lesson also with Startup CPG. I mean, going back, 4 or 5 years, like fighting for every single user we really wanted to have
Right.
join the Slack, and then we just put in the work and demonstrated the value. And then 4 or 5 years later, now everybody is telling their friends to join, and the growth is really organic and it just happens in a really nice way. But man, it takes a lot of work to actually make that happen.
Well, and Amazon is interesting because I told a couple people today, I was like, the number one resource on Amazon is time and market. I mean, if we're talking about startup CPG brands, right, that is like the thing that we don't have, right? And so there's a lot to be said for like, I consider Amazon an ever expanding web, right? So the older your product is, the closer you are to the center, and thus the more connected you are to everything that has come since. And you see a lot of examples of that, and that is how Amazon works, right? I mean, Amazon, if you boil down Amazon, it is a search engine that wants to show people what it thinks they're going to buy. That's the whole thing. It doesn't necessarily look at the highest bid for advertising or things like that. It's like, what is the thing that we know is going to turn into a conversion right now? And we're going to prioritize that organically. That's just how rankings work, or with advertising, right? And so that's why when you're a smaller brand, you have to pay a crazy premium because you have to like tempt the algorithm, be like, you know what, we're going to take that money. We may not sell something, but we're going to take this higher bid, versus the Pepsi or the Coke that's just there. And that's a very interesting, way to think about it, right? I mean, is it exactly wired that way? Mostly, it may, but Amazon doesn't really talk about exactly how it's wired, but that's how we approach it. That's how we see it work, practically. And it is something to be said about starting that process, and even if it isn't time for explosive growth, it's like, well, let's get you moving. There's also a lot of categories when we think about beverage and stuff like that like online is just going to increasingly be a receptacle for your brand growth and demand, right? I always tell beverage brands, might have told you this at some point, but I mean, if I love a product, so Rebel's a good example. When we started at Rebel, there was no e-commerce. Everyone thought I was insane for wanting to launch it, and when we launched, we had a crazy high average order value. And it's like, why is this happening? Well, if you go to Whole Foods on like a Saturday, as many people do, most people shop for groceries on the weekend, it's like it's a super shop set, right? Any brand. But, Rebel or protein drink or kombucha, it doesn't matter. It's like if people love that, they want to have it all the time. And you kind of look like a weirdo if you're just like, I need like 20 of these off the shelf right now, right? Or like, hey, like, could you go in the back and see if you have a couple cases of this? So the logical thing to expect is people discover your brand, they love it, and they go online and they start buying cases. That's how you really start to move units. And that's an interesting way to think about it too, right? So Amazon is both a growth opportunity, but it's also a place where, even your best customers, they're not necessarily going to be big D2C shoppers anymore. They're going to come to Amazon, right? That is increasing.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, and I shop that way myself. Also, I might find something
Right.
that I like, but I mean, man, I'm a big Amazon fan. Like shopping on Amazon, at least personally,
Mhm.
I get my groceries from Amazon fresh because they're the best prices. Basically,
Yeah.
I get my staples from them. I wouldn't necessarily. I feel like you can get bananas any color except for yellow from them. They just kind of go from like green to brown, but for staples, they just have the best prices, and it comes right to my door. So I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate it, and also just the ease of getting everything
Right.
on Amazon. I don't want to enter my info into a bunch of different websites and get all the emails from them and have to enter my credit card info and passwords that'll definitely get leaked at some point by some
Right.
people. So I mean, yeah, personally, that's definitely how I shop. So if you're a new brand and you're thinking about how to go to market, who is Amazon going to be right for? Who should think about Amazon as a big part of their strategy versus who might it not be right for?
Yeah, I mean, look, perishable is going to be really hard, right? Early on. I mean, that's one thing that's challenging. The other thing that we see is really challenging, frankly, is beverage, right? I mean, I've had those conversations, even with, beverage brands where it's like, look, if you've never had something and you're just a regular consumer, it's like, are you going to buy a whole case of them to start? And that's going to be your first experience? Like, boy, that needs to be like a great product detail page, like, to win that. And that's exactly what we see, right? I mean, it's not like it's a wrong place to start, but it's a particularly challenging place to start, right? And things like, you're going into like a particularly competitive vertical, protein powders, protein bars, and stuff like that. I think that there's a lot of work that you can do in retail, in store, and Amazon can certainly be a part of it to start to just understand that message, that really drives it home and gets the conversion, right? So Amazon can be the right place to start, but also some categories are more expensive to break into than others, right? And I think like one thing to look at, I mean, there's a lot of great tools out there, the Helium 10s of the world and Jungle Scout and all that stuff, where you can download and really look at your category, revenue, right? And so if you're in a category, you look at Amazon and it's like, hey, most of the revenue in this category is tied up in three huge brands that I see everywhere. It's probably going to be kind of hard to break into. If you see that it's like, oh, there's a ton of interesting brands comparable to me that seem to be having this healthy, maybe not huge, but like 10, 15, 20 grand a month, it's like, cool. Like, we can probably build towards that, right? So a lot of it, I mean, you can do some basic analysis, in the space yourself. And sometimes we see that certain categories really under index and it's surprising. Salad dressings is a weird one. Like if you look at the salad dressing category on Amazon, like it's pretty small. Like big brands are not selling that much salad dressing, and
I
small
wonder
brands really
why.
either. I don't know. It's one of those things. I guess it's like it's always there, and like you're going to buy it when you go to buy the veggies, so it's not necessarily an afterthought for Amazon. It's like it's just been one of those things that really like it's kind of mysterious and interesting and weird how it shakes out versus other verticals. Anything with the word energy related to it, explosive right now, tons of room to just like drive trial, but expensive to break in. And so the ecosystem is interesting because it has every little niche has evolved in its own unique way. And in some ways, you're right about Mars. We've had the pleasure at Daybreak of I'm super proud of it. We've worked on a lot of legendary candy brands, Big League Chew and Warheads and and stuff like that. And it's awesome. And it's like in a lot of these guys, like they just never got around to like thinking about Amazon. Like that's not, most of the candy we eat in this country is manufactured in this country. They're legacy companies, it's like, and this has been pretty far down the track for them. So it's been commercialized much later, where the brands actually take charge of it versus others have been really played out. So it's been really interesting to see that and then to see like, where certain brands are able to drive outsized impact in their category or start to really change the narrative, right? We have a nut butter client that, they make a cashew butter, but they can sell against almond butters and peanut butters and, and keto butters and not keto butters and protein peanut butter, and it's such an interesting narrative for them because, hey, we take that to the Thrive buyer or the Whole Foods buyer. And it's like, look at this data. Like, we're not huge, but like no one else transcends the category like we do,
Yeah,
So
you know what? It's interesting to think about some products that just hit.
yeah,
One example for me always comes to mind is Just Iced Tea, the
yeah,
new, relatively new one from Seth Goldman, bringing it back after Coca-Cola discontinued Honest Tea.
yeah,
And I would be in Sprouts innovation sets, and there are a lot of drinks that just sit there and snacks that sit there, and the Just Iced Tea is gone. And
right.
it's such a simple product, and it's a glass bottle and it's clear and it says Just Iced Tea, and it looks nice, but high quality but pretty plain. And there's
Mhm.
just something about it. You're like, I get it, and it looks good, and I'll take it, and I don't need to know who the brand is, and I don't know if they're doing much on Amazon or not, but I suspect it would do really well there as well because it's just such an easy concept. Probably shipping glass is not the easiest thing for them to do,
Yeah,
but in general, I feel like that's an easy one to take a flyer on if you're shopping on Amazon and it
right.
has good
Yeah,
reviews. Like, yeah, I'll take that versus a lot of other stuff where you're like, yeah, do I want a whole case of this thing? Like, I hate
right,
waste more than almost anything. Like, I do not want to have 12 of those and have to get rid of 11 of them if this thing doesn't taste good. Whereas if I'm like,
right,
let's say if I'm all in on CMOS and then I go on Amazon, like, I'm just going to get the one that has the best reviews that seems like a good deal, and
right.
I wouldn't know any of the brands. So yeah, pretty interesting to think about the dynamics of categories where there are strong brands, but maybe not strong premium brands, or no one's really doing a good job, and they're just like maybe not a lot of competitors on there and their legacy brands. I guess
Yeah.
same as retail, I guess.
Well, and I think that, like, look, I mean, this space is just developing. I'm looking forward to Expo this year, like I do every year, because I just know I'm going to walk around and just be like, I thought I knew this industry, and I was totally wrong. It's like there's just so many new things emerging. It's interesting when you talk about we started working on Eat the Change like probably 6 months before it even launched their first product, and later became Just Iced Tea. Yeah, and just watching that whole transformation. I mean, obviously, getting rid of Honest Tea was just a ridiculous decision they made. But like, I think Just Ice Tea fits because it's a really, maybe in some ways like not threatening, and it's like, oh, good. Like, this is just good iced tea. I like the story behind it. You don't necessarily know that it's honest and that whole story, right? And sometimes I think that can work really well versus like sometimes if people come to me and they say, we want to launch on Amazon and we're doing something no one has ever done before, that's actually like one of the scariest things someone can say to me, because it's like Amazon is very much about putting things in the right box, right? You search for protein powder, no one's trying to sell you workout clothes, right? I mean, it's like, it's very much in its own box. So if you're like, oh, we have a new box that no one else is in, it's kind of scary, right? And I mean, and that's something that like maybe you can have, a lot of adoption for that, but online channels can be a particular challenge,
Yeah.
especially a marketplace like Amazon.
Be expensive, yeah, to teach that to everybody. But yeah,
Right.
and then I've worked in the energy drink category, and I was just blown away by the volume that Celsius was doing
Sure.
online. And I mean, it just is actually the thing that surprised me most was their price point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, talk about a consumer's dream for that, because if you like that product, and yeah, you don't want to go into the grocery store and just like buy a 24 pack and have to carry it, then you can go on Amazon, and it's, I mean, a fraction of the
Very
price,
cheap.
honestly, to get it shipped to your house. I don't know how they do that, but it's cheap, and obviously it's very much on trend right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm digging Amazon a little bit because I know the answer to some of that, which is, I mean, if you look at big CPG, right, like within Amazon, one of the things that Amazon has really pushed them to do, right, is to match their pricing at the grocery store. Right. And that goes from Pepsi to Coke to a thing of McCormick, like seasoning. Right. And so like they have, big CPG, like they're not making any money on Amazon for sure, right? I mean, you see that, and Amazon, I mean, a lot of the pretty high fees that independent brands are paying, like they're definitely subsidizing like the really really crazy deals that Amazon's able to put out there. Like it's totally true, right? And so it's very interesting to do, like to work through that and some of the battles that it's like, man, this is just going to actually be impossible to like be on parity with some of these
Mm.
like big name brands, and that is what makes us have to work much, much, much harder, right?
Yeah.
I've worked on a few conventional like mainstream brands. I'm like I like the weird stuff, so like not a ton, but it's very interesting to me how kind of much easier it can be, than like the premium or just the unknown or the really leading edge. It's like it's actually just much, much harder work. So like if it feels like it is, it's because it is. It's not
Yeah.
just you,
That's interesting. That honestly didn't even occur to me. I should have asked you before about it, but that, yeah, okay. Amazon probably is subsidizing that heavily. I'm sure there are a bunch of really happy
as well.
consumers out there that are extra locked into Amazon because they're getting such a good price on that. Like, wow, Amazon's the best for everything, then.
Yeah,
I'll get
totally.
all my stuff from them, even the higher margin stuff.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, very good to think about. Okay, so let's say you're a brand and now you have decided Amazon is going to be an important part of your strategy. How should you think about it then? So, when should you launch it and how much money are you going to need to make it meaningful for you so you aren't just kind of tossing it away and, not investing enough in it or investing too much and probably not getting good ROI because you're kind of forcing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we definitely tell brands, I mean, you have to be in a position to spend at least $2,000 a month on Amazon ads, right? I mean, from our perspective, that's enough to like learn, and scale things and see if they work and keep going, and build the momentum to actually get organic traffic growth, get a little bit of ranking and basically spin the flywheel, right? And of Amazon and get all the gears turning. And anything less than that, it's like you may be successful, but you can't get momentum, and it just ends up being this very slow crawl. Right. The other thing is we definitely speak with brands that say, Amazon has to be profitable from day one. And it's like, I just can't promise you that. Like I can't make an honest projection that shows that. And if you're a new brand, right? Like if you can't say, oh, and by the way, we have 100,000 followers on TikTok, and we're just going to push them all to you, right? I mean, that's obviously free traffic, free sales, but we try to build a model and a projection that kind of starts from scratch. And what we typically find with brands is that we can get them to profitable within 6 to 12 months while building a business that's going to get into five figures from zero within that period. Spending that $2,000, maybe we increase it to 2,500 or 3K, later in the year. And then the interesting thing is it's a lot about we can build that longer term plan because you get to the end of year one, it's like, oh, it's pretty good outcome. It's like, yeah, now let's just extend that 12 more months. And it's like, hey, look, revenue's that much higher, subscribers are that much higher. And, really having a firm grasp on the financials, the outcome, how that's going to develop over time and repeat. That's the stuff that you need to be paying attention to and be ready to look at.
And so we did a webinar with you recently. If anybody wants to check it out, it's on our Vimeo
Yeah.
page, vimeo.com/startupcpg. And we went through the model that, I've seen you go through before, and it's just a really helpful way to think about it. So you project
Yeah.
out the 12-month sales and return for a brand by, top line of the model is going to be how many people are likely to visit your brand organically, how
Yeah.
much of that what's your conversion rate expected to be for that? And then you can go into, great, now if you're throwing money into ads, and then
Right.
what's your conversion rate going to be for that? What is the average revenue that you can expect per customer? What is the typical
Yeah.
cost per customer that you're going to get by month, which is going to change? So if you can imagine all of the columns that'll go into this model, you can
Yeah.
project out a pretty nice P&L for the year. That's, yeah, it's going to be pretty accurate. That's what I'm talking about when I tell people like Leon's very reasonable. It all just like the assumptions all make sense and they're not all going to be 100% true, but it's a pretty good roadmap.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's, and like we look at it that way, because I mean, we want to be excited about Amazon and we are excited about Amazon and it is a big opportunity, but it's like, well, yeah, but all this stuff has got to come first, and like month one is not going to be like month 12. You have to, really understand the difference. And then part of it's just an education, aspect of it too. Stuff shouldn't be a secret.
So what'll be the biggest things that'll change over the course of that year? I'm guessing, like you're not going to have much of a track record there, so people won't trust your product as much. So maybe initially the cost per acquisition of the customer is going to be a little bit higher. It could go down over time. Maybe you can also figure out how to get the average revenue up a little bit higher once people trust
Yeah.
you more, get your retention up, hopefully.
Conversion rates really change a lot, right? Because when you start off, you're not going to have many reviews, right? I mean, you don't need to get hundreds of reviews, to build any confidence, but 30 is a lot better than 3. and month one you're going to have three. And so that's one thing that we change pretty quickly. The cost of advertising, because hey, you have to do testing for a little while, but then also as you start to find your niche and consistently buy against it, like I was saying, Amazon's going to help you. You'll pay less over time to buy the same ads because you're starting to get some traction. You can get some favorable treatment from the algorithm and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we really see conversion change a lot, and then obviously top line traffic, that momentum that we should start to see, right? Because especially in CPG, it's like, hey guys, like, we use this in the webinar. It's like we make mushroom coffee. So it's like, it's not a big mystery, like the ads we need to buy and where we need to rank. Right. So it's really about mining this, like, deeply, this vertical. And as you work through that, that can definitely have a big impact, in your total results and your traffic and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, and speaking of the reviews, I think I've heard from you and other people, you need a critical mass of reviews. Like as a shopper, if I look at something and it has a 5-star rating with 27 reviews, I'm like, well, those are fake and I
Yeah.
shouldn't buy this yet. But if I, okay, if I see 50, like, yeah, that's getting where I need it to be. If it's over 100, cool. It kind of,
Yeah.
depends on what it's up against, right? Like what's the other product I'm thinking of, and how, if it has 500 reviews and it's a little bit lower, probably I'd go with that one. So,
Yeah.
in the early days, what I see brands doing now is, I hope nobody from Amazon is listening and reports them all. But, basically, like, you got to get those early ones and going out and basically just getting their friends to do it and saying, like, hey, please leave a review, and even reimbursing them for the product. I've seen a lot of
Totally.
that. And, just basically begging and pleading for actual reviews, order it, wait for it to get delivered. Hopefully you love it also. And then, leave the review so it's
Everyone you're working
verified.
with, your sales team, your brokers, like stuff like that. Just put it on our invoice, like everyone open it, take out your phone and buy it right now, and stuff like that. I mean, we like to get to like 100. It's like once we're at 100, it's like, okay, this is going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like the rate of review growth on Amazon has gone down, quite a bit over time. Because it's a little bit less. People are a little bit more used to e-commerce. It's also frankly, it's hard to get people to say nice things in this country. It's very easy to get them to say negative things. So it's easy to get bad reviews if things aren't going well, but the other stuff can be like pulling teeth, And
Yeah.
so, number one thing that we tell early stage brands is like, QR code, with a sticker on the packaging. It's a pain to do. Your 3PL is going to want to charge you for it. Just do it for your first couple of shipments and pallets, and it's really going to help. You know?
Yeah. So you're talking like if you're a beverage, you mean on like the outside of the 12 pack, something like
Yeah,
that.
for sure. One of the most successful things, I'll shout out, Tyler Dooley from Wake Up Water, because he's such a great guy and an impressive businessman. I think I told Tyler, I was like, hey, like, just, make a review sticker that says a review would mean the world to our small business or something like that. So I made this giant sticker for this little bag of Wake Up Water. It just said, white paper, black text, like a review would mean the world with the QR code. And we got hundreds of reviews in like a couple of months. It's like, this works so well. Like, this is the best thing.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited to announce that Startup CPG finally has an official Amazon agency partner. I know a lot of you are looking to Amazon as a great growth channel for this year and beyond. And Daybreak is the best agency that I've come across that will work with emerging brands. They have a really affordable retainer structure. It's a lot less than you'll find with other agencies that might charge you upwards of $5,000 a month, which is crazy. Based on recommendations from this community, I actually worked with Leon for my own brand and had an amazing experience. The sales grew very quickly. We started ranking really high on organic search results and really just capturing search terms in the category. I think he is an amazing fit for brands in this community, and I highly recommend reaching out to him for a chat. You can reach out to him at leon@daybreak.agency. That's Leon at Daybreak, Daybreak.agency. Make sure you mention us at Startup CPG so that you can get $600 of free design credits if you end up working with them. Good luck. Yes,
So
it's so impactful. And if you're listening right now to this podcast, a review would mean the world to
that's right.
us. So please go into Apple Podcasts and rate us. And we see every time that you do it, and we get so happy. So thank you. But back to the business at hand. Yeah, I'm sure it makes your job so much easier if a brand comes to you with those 100 reviews kind of ready to go. And then, you've got the kindling all warm. It's ready to light up. Pretty interesting to think about. And then, I had some experience with the Vine program. Amazon has this program called Vine where, hey, if you want, you can send people a certain number of free product. These are people who just love reviewing things on Amazon and they will give you some reviews to get started. But my experience was not so great on that program because, you would send people a product and then their reviews are like, nah, I don't like this kind of product, 1 star. Like, well, like, don't do that, man, just because like you're not even the consumer for this thing. And so I honestly, I really regretted it because, if you send somebody potato chips and then they review it and they're like, nah, I don't like, high calorie stuff. Like, yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not for you, please don't do that. So I think you probably would recommend people at least start kind of small if they do something like that to see how it goes.
Totally. I mean, look, Amazon has struggled with, with the Vine program. I think most people probably wouldn't remember or even know this, but when the Vine program was first introduced, I believe that the pricing was you could get 5 reviews, and I think Amazon charged like $2,000 for that. it's like some
Whoa.
like insane amount of money. It's like, who would do this? And people were probably just signing up left and right, but like no small brands were actually going to do that. So now they have this Vine program, and it started out great, but then like so many things on Amazon, a lot of strategies basically once everyone finds out, and especially once like Chinese sellers, find out and stuff, like the really like there's tons of volume of those types of sellers, they just run out of quality reviewers. That's what it is. And so, you definitely have people that are buying reviewers. They leave like the minimum junky reviews, and then they like own a convenience store, or they just have some outlet to sell that stuff. So they're just getting free product from Amazon and selling it. We've seen a whole bunch of that because we've seen people leave reviews that are just not at all relevant. The interesting thing about that recently, we had someone had a really bad experience. They gave away some product. They didn't even get the reviews. The reviews were not good. And Amazon said, they basically sent us a link to the terms policy and said, hey, whatever reviews you get or don't get, sorry. Like, so it's one to approach cautiously for sure. You can get up to 30 reviews, start with 10, see how it goes, because you can kind of dig out from 10. 30's harder. So
All right. So now getting to the journey a little bit more. So
yeah.
let's say, with brands that you start working with, for example, what are the first couple of things that you're going to try to do for them to help them get set up, like looking at their listings or, what are the first things you want to check?
Totally. I mean, I we definitely look at. So, I mean, if you're a existing brand, we'll use that as an example, right? I mean, how have you been converting? Do we see that that's healthy? We like to see, consumable brands be converting at 10% or above, both for advertising and organic traffic. Right. And so if not, okay, let's take a look at the listings. We've inherited so many businesses where it's like, oh, that ad agency's way bigger than us, like probably does a great job, but they didn't tell you your listings are awful. And so that's something we can just really kind of eye it. And it's like, if you sell a drink and the second image is just the back of your can, it's like, okay, we need to work on this creative. And that's a big part that we really look at is essentially that. The other thing we look at with advertising, and, if you just have an agency brand of any size, is like, hey, like export the keyword report from last month and sort by spend, because it's like, where's the money going? That's just my whole thing with my team. It's like, where's the client's money actually going? We want 80 cents or more of every dollar to be going towards things that drive sales, right? So not wasteful, not testing too much. We want to move towards performance. So that's a big part of it too, because we just find a lot of ads that are not super active. The other one, and this is a fun one, I probably don't mention that much. If you're on Amazon today as an existing brand and you're just kind of wondering what's going on, you can go into Ads Manager and click history. You can see every update, that's being made there. It's timestamped, etc. We make, I mean, on average, I mean, we're making like 2 to 3,000 updates, to ads like over the course of a month, right? I mean, for a brand that's probably spending, call it $3,000 to $5,000. I mean, it's a ton of optimizations that happen all the time. We don't use software, we're doing that ourselves. And that's definitely one thing to really look at, as well. And for a new brand, it's kind of about building that structure, to be able to measure those things, right? It's like we want great creative. We want to really look at those conversion rates early on. It's probably not going to be double digits out of the gate, but we like 7 or 8%. If it's 2%, you have a problem, Yeah.
And generally, great creative. I mean, it could look really beautiful, but also probably just needs to hit very hard and simply on the key attributes of a product. Is that right?
Swipe, swipe, swipe. I mean, I probably use like the dating app analogy. It's like it's all about appealing to consumers, and they're not going to give you a ton of time. One thing that we're super guilty of, or many of us are, we look at Amazon we're at work, we work within it, we look at it on our desktop. No one does that. It's like it's all about the phone and mobile and everything. So I always feel the same way about web design. If I'm ever helping with a website development and I look at a desktop website, I'm like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, you're totally right. And I never think about it that way. But yeah, I've almost never bought something on Amazon from my computer. I don't know. I would just never think to do it the same way I would never think to buy salad dressing on Amazon. I
Right.
don't know why. It just wouldn't occur to me. That's pretty funny. I really like that point you made about sorting based off dollar spend. I've always done that in my life. Anytime if it's like a
Right.
consultant or
Oh yeah.
a report brings me some kind of spreadsheet with numbers, first thing I do is just sort it based on dollar value. And then usually you could just look at the top 10 rows and really dig into it. And you're like, okay, well, here are the things we need to change.
Well, and especially when we have, I look at me. If you're a small brand, you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can spend $2,000, and that's like, look, in 2024 in CPG, that's real money for a new brand, and you just can't do it. Even if it is your main term, even if it is your mushroom coffee search term, and it's your main thing, if you're not converting against it, pull back. Think about, like, where else are we converting? There's got to be something, if not, great. Let's go back to that creative discussion. Let's play with pricing and stuff like that. All of these things are very, very important, and price testing is an important part of it as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So then let's say
Yeah.
you fix up the creative, it's super good. And then now you're trying to figure out what are the right keywords I need to start putting in for my ads to be ranking against. How do you typically find that out? I know there, like, you can probably do a report and figure out what consumers are saying about it, but what are all the ways?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look at, so within brand analytics, if you're brand registered on Amazon, you can get all the access to the analytics dashboard for brands, and you can actually take any of your competitors' ASINs. It's like, this is who we want to be. It's like, cool, you can drop that into that tool, and it will tell you all of the terms that they're converting against, right? You can also use Helium 10 and stuff like that that will show you here's where they rank. So that's pretty interesting too, but like Amazon, the search query performance report, I think that's one, will basically show like, oh, these are the terms. And you definitely find sleepers in there, right? That is like, oh, I hadn't thought about this one. And so you can really understand, especially if it's a brand that is like high volume, but maybe they're not a big retail brand. So they're not going to have that high brand search volume, but like we know that they're selling a lot. Okay, where's that coming from? Right. And sometimes it's obvious, if sometimes it's mushroom coffee, sometimes might be something a little bit more long tail that is a lower hanging fruit for you to go after, as a smaller brand and stuff like that. And so that's a really good way to do it. And then, we love like the Helium 10s of the world and stuff like that really give us, a ton of extra data.
What's that other one that you mentioned where that brands can use now, and even they can kind of get like a little freebie peek at the
Oh
data?
yeah, yeah. Well, Nozzle is one for LTV, right? That we really look at. So, we love Nozzle because it gives us our, if anyone ever says like, "What's our repeat rate?" That's like a 2D measure, right? And so, because it's like, okay, great. In January we had 1,000 customers, and 10% of them were repeat customers. So, is it everyone's second order or their third order? Like, how's their LTV developing? And one of the main arguments that used to be more popular for D2C versus Amazon was like, you don't get any of that cohort data, and you can't really analyze LTV. Well, with Nozzle, that all just goes, like, we get all of that data, right? And so it's very interesting because we have brands where it's like, hey, like, we know you're a D2C focused brand, and we just run Amazon for you, but like, check out our LTV growth on this channel. How does that compare to what you're seeing on D2C? Honestly, like, often we see that on Amazon, it grows faster, it can be healthier. Why? Because Amazon's the grocery store and your website is a specialty store, and like, most people don't go to the farmer, the butcher, and like make all those stops to do their grocery shopping in real life. It's the same thing with Amazon, right? So we love Nozzle for that because it really allows us, again, to tie it back into our model, and is this moving in the right direction?
Yeah, got it. Okay. And So, and can you give us just the little primer again on like
Yeah.
FBA and the distribution options and the costs for actually getting your product to people through Amazon?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, Amazon remains, far less expensive than the average 3PL. That has definitely changed over time, right? But because 3PLs have become much more expensive. So Amazon realizes, hey, we're somewhere between 20 and 30% cheaper. Oh, these guys just got 20% more expensive. Cool. We're just going to keep that gap the same, right? And which is very interesting. Most brands, I mean, look, if you are a shelf stable brand and your product has, a 6 or 12 or 24-month shelf life, you need to ship in and do fulfillment via FBA. There's a couple reasons. Number one, I mean, our Amazon is never going to prioritize a product that isn't fulfilled by Amazon. You definitely are getting some level of like punished by the algorithm for it. The other thing, and a part of the reason why they do that, is conversion rates are just lower when you do your own fulfillment. And we've played that out. We've had brands that really wanted to do their own fulfillment. It's like, well, can we just try FBA? Okay, yeah. We bring in the product to FBA. It's like, hey, your conversion rate just went up like 35%. Like this business is just going to grow. Let's figure out how to get it in there. Doing your own fulfillment is, definitely it's a necessity for some brands, but certainly if you're a beverage, if you're something heavy, you're just never going to be able to keep up with Amazon's costs, right? Amazon has now been pushing their, buy with Prime program, really, really hard on brands. I understand why it's important. I understand the benefits of it. I think it's great, but it's also one of those things where it's like, look, it's actually you should look at the rate card of standard FBA fulfillment versus buy with Prime. Buy with Prime is significantly more expensive, but you can keep your customer data, right? So you have to start to think like, how much is that actually worth to me? Right? Because you can just put a link on your website. Look, I mean, if you go to liquiddeath.com, where do they sell their water? It just says buy on Amazon and just takes you straight there, right? Through the Amazon brand referral bonus, when you do that and link directly to Amazon, you get 10% back. So you can do buy with Prime and pay kind of a premium fee, but hey, you get to keep your customer. Or you can just push people to Amazon, get 10% back, and pay the standard FBA fee. It's a question that we
Oh,
ask. I like buy with Prime. I do. It has a reason to exist, but we just got to do the math and see what makes the most sense.
yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. And what are some other low hanging fruit type pieces of advice or things that people figure out working with you in the early days? I remember one thing was basically just had a group SKUs so that you could consolidate reviews within a product line so that they'd all roll up to the same thing, which would help you get to that 50 or 100 number faster. Any other things like that?
I mean, we can do more targeted advertising, and targeted promotions on Amazon now. So really, I mean, if you have good repeat, it's like, hey, like we can run a subscription only coupon, and we can run ads directly to people that have purchased before to get them to come back and start subscriptions and repeat. Right? Often we find that a lot of agencies aren't building that out as much as they should, and like we can do that and start to quickly grow that repeat, and then you start to lock that in. The second purchase is a little bit harder than the third, than the fourth, et cetera. It gets easier every time. So we start moving that flywheel as one. The other thing is, really looking at reviews and how we can start to pick that up quite a bit as well. And then the other thing is like, we look at these benchmarks very seriously because we come in and it's like, we'll look at the conversion and go, okay, yeah, we probably have a creative problem or a pricing problem and just get right to work with that stuff. And so it is important to like, have a partner or just like take good notes for things like this and be like, okay, this is kind of where we should be. And if we're not, like, this is what we should be talking about, and really looking at it there. The other thing is we do a lot of like listing cleanup and stuff like that. Usually there's a lot of elements of the account that are just aren't getting touched. It's like make sure every field in the back end and a lot of like that super nerdy stuff is done. It used to not be weighted as heavily on Amazon, but it's becoming more and more important as it becomes more and more competitive.
So, over time, let's say the things that people need from you in the first couple months go well and they're growing. What's the kind of stuff that really you're then going to be focusing on, 6, 9, 12 months down the line, or the, brands on their own? What are the different kinds of problems they're going to be facing at that point?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you just start to see, definitely like just catalog systemic issues like are it generally for a more mature business on Amazon. It's like, no, we grow the way that we want to, but Amazon just breaks stuff. So like revisiting, like you may have listings that you think are complete and they look really good. Go back and make sure everything is still there because like the algorithm will just make updates for you because it thinks it's more accurate. That's one we really look at if you are a more mature brand on Amazon, or even if you're just a year or 18 months in, again, I mean, it's like I don't make any money for nozzle, but it's like you should go get that, free 14-day trial and really check in on what that is telling you. Don't just look at your base number of repeat, but like where's this really going? We look at Amazon over time, like, one thing with most brands we work on, I mean, we kind of have like a 90-day engagement up front that's a little bit more expensive because we do a lot of the lifting, and then we're off to the races and we have a plan and we know where we're going. And so like 6, 9, 12 months in, I mean, we're pacing towards, that model and we've dialed it in and we've addressed the things. And, we just use that as our North Star. Right. And then we're able to really understand where we're going. I think some brands it depends on your situation. They're going to want to iterate and try to drive that explosive growth. I get it. Some people have the money to do that. Not everyone these days, and so it is about like, is this getting healthier? And then really looking at maybe some of the smaller ways that you can start to improve your P&L and get a few
Yeah.
more dollars back from Amazon.
Okay, so Leon, because you see what happens across so many brands, you must have some ideas for like, if you were going to launch your own brand onto Amazon now, instead of just being the one who supports really well all of these different brands, what's an example of something that you would
Oh,
go for, or like, a key attribute you'd be trying to call out, or something that you had learned about design and you'd really want to just make that part of your strategy as you figured it out.
geez, I definitely have a list of things I definitely wouldn't do. I won't get into those, but I think a lot of it. I mean, we see a lot of space in, do you have products that are, going to have like good ongoing usage, that you can actually have a pack size that is accessible to people, and while still having some kind of product format that can, drive trial and, and get people through the door, right? I mean, we see that drink mixes obviously are a massive vertical on Amazon right now. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? I mean, it's like it's so small. It's like the cost of shipping is basically nothing, for products like that. So it's great to have good
Yeah,
margin. Oh, yeah, you're drinking one
I'm
right now.
drinking. I'm
Yeah,
drinking one right now. I
yeah,
love it,
yeah,
actually.
yeah. Well, but then we look at brands like that. I mean, I think for me, it's like I would really look at a space that has not been commodified, and where someone has not introduced like mushroom supplements are a really challenging one for us, right? Because you'll have a brand that says, "Oh, we have this reishi cordyceps turkey tail, supplement, and ours is $59.99." It's like, cool. This one is the exact same thing, and it's $9.99. And so it's for the consumer, unless they are really, really nerding out on ingredients, or sometimes it's just that the brand's trying to get a crazy premium. We want to find a category that isn't that polluted,
Yeah.
and that we can definitely be in the middle, right?
It's
So,
funny that you say that because I got onto drink mixes, one of the tablets from a brand that had sent product into
right.
us. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like, because, I should be drinking and hydrating more. And so I started drinking it at home. I like a little flavor. It's nice.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then, one day I was like, oh, it's kind of expensive. And one day I went to reorder. I think they were out of stock on Amazon. So the price was really high. I was like, well, all right, well, let me see what else is out there. And then I found a competitor that was way cheaper. I'm like, all right,
Right.
well, I
Yeah.
drink this now. And I'm like, but I feel bad for these guys because they basically brought me to the party. And then I just found a better option. So I could definitely, I see what you're saying. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so just so brands know, what does it typically cost for a brand to work with you? If they're like, obviously they need to have budget for the ad spend and all of that, but can
Yeah.
you give kind of like a range just so people know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're definitely like starting brands around like, the 23, $2,500 range, right? And to manage Amazon. And then we try to find efficiency over time. Again, there's like a big lift that goes into it up front. And then, we try to say, hey, maybe we can take that down to like 18 or 1900 or something like that. It definitely varies. I mean, based off of, the catalog size and the ad budget and stuff like that. But I think it's important to remember that, looking at like for us, like we're a full service team, right? We run operations and then we help with creative and strategy. So I mean, you're really for like a super fair price, in my perspective, just getting kind of like the full, like, okay, cool, Amazon check, and we have that taken care of. And we feel better about that than, trying to get, four or five, $6,000 a month and saying we're going to blow this up. And then it's like, oh, we have to justify ourselves constantly and everything. So I would definitely like that's what I think is appropriate, like in the service space, and that's the range that we typically try.
Yeah, and one thing that really impressed me about you, I was always kind of wondering how you could provide so much service at the low rate, and then I learned, I think, as I have figured out, you also have learned really to make use of incredible offshore talent, where it can be much more affordable, and sometimes they just have so much more experience actually than people you might be able to find in the U.S. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, definitely. I mean, look, our team is split between the US and India. I mean, definitely some people have like they use that as a selling point, like we're all based in the US. I'm like, great, you must be really expensive to work with. And the interesting thing is that if we look at India, throughout, from the dot-com bubble all the way up until now, it's just been looked at as like, oh, there's just tons of cheap labor here, right? I mean, there's been an explosion in, cell phone usage and e-commerce and internet access. It's a wild story if you look into it. But there's a ton of people that have been working in Amazon for 5, 7, 10 years, but they've gained a ton of experience, but you don't necessarily get the opportunity to like move up, right? And one thing that's important in India, right? I mean, most people know it's multi-generational living, it's a very tight family thing. And so those opportunities may be in Dubai as a place that they're all moving to and everything, or hey, you have to move to the US. Well, that's really hard. I mean, culturally, family wise, and everything. And so, look, I'm just straight up proud, of the fact that it's like we're able to take people that are very experienced, reward them with great jobs, that they deserve. They've been working in the space, longer than many people calling themselves experts and stuff, and then like that money's going to supporting like a big family, it's awesome. And then our team is super, super dedicated, really passionate. Everyone sticks with us for years. They're not trying to rapidly climb this thing. And ecom for me, I mean, look, I fully acknowledge I'm becoming like the grumpy old man in the space, but it's like it didn't used to be as greedy. I've looked at a lot of resumes and stuff of people in the space, and it's clear people are just trying to climb that ladder as much as possible, and that leads to more instability in my business and supporting your business, right? It also just is a crazy amount of cost. If I hire four people that want to make 125 grand, a year, it's like, great, that's $500,000 I have to come up with now, and those people wouldn't necessarily be able to support that many businesses, right? I could pay an outsized salary in the developing world and have a really passionate team, and that's worked for us, and we're really proud of that.
Having been a brand and worked with you and just being able to get that level of service and performance at a lower rate is really great. And that I think also, as somebody who also has found some incredible offshore resources. Yeah, I mean, it's really a pleasure to get to work with them, and including
Totally.
we have a couple people who are really part of our like really important parts of our startup CPG team who deliver incredible work, and they're fun and enthusiastic members of the team, and they want the same things all of us want, which is to provide for their families and grow in their careers and do interesting, meaningful work. So I hope that's a lesson that everybody can think about. And I mean, I always tell people actually, hey, if you're thinking about that next, ops hire or something that it can be, it could be somewhat routine, but very, time intensive. Think about things like Upwork, because you
Yeah.
can get just such incredible people. This is a big, beautiful world that we live in, and there is incredibly experienced talent all over. Many
Absolutely.
people, even abroad, will work on your time zone. But I mean, it can give you a huge lift so that you can focus your dollars these days on more other areas, and just give your brand a better chance of succeeding. So I appreciate that, and I've taken inspiration from you on that as well. I think that's a pretty good summary for now. This time has
Yeah.
flown by, but I also have special treat for
Oh, there
you.
you
Well,
go.
you can, I don't know if it'll be a treat, but I'll play it. I wrote a song for you in the minute while I was waiting for you to join the podcast here. So I think this is definitely going to become your jingle. So let me see if I can get it going here. Since you are the ukulele master, I've got my ukulele out
Yes.
here now. Well, I've got Leon from, and I hope I'm gonna I know I'll do really well, and the results are gonna show it. Before you know it, I'll be selling really well, and I've got cash coming in, and I'm ranking real high. Come on, ring the bell.
Love it.
Okay, that's enough. I don't know if
Nice.
that's gonna work out when we do the
I
actual
always have one within
production.
arm's reach too. There you go.
All right, let's get one from you also.
No, that's
Now, yeah, let's hear something from you. You can show us how it's really done.
all good. All good. No, I love it.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah,
Well,
thanks so much.
yeah. Hey, Leon, thank you so much for joining us. And if people want to connect with you, so Leon's email is leon@agency. You can also find him on the Startup CPG Slack. Any other good ways for people to get in touch with you if they're interested to chat more?
Those are definitely the best ones. So I try to end my day. I'm very proud of the fact that I like end my days always with less than like 20 emails like unread max. So like I will always get back to people. Even if we get slammed, it takes me a little while. So yeah, feel free to reach out anytime.
All right, great. Leon Lewis from Agency, thank you so much for sharing all of these insights. It was just fun to catch up with you. And I think anybody listening to this is going to have a much better chance of being successful themselves. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't forget, it would mean the world if you leave a review. Please do it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Um,
Thanks.
all right. Thanks, Leon.
Bye. Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharf. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.